General Hospital spoilers reveal that Jocelyn had known all along that Britt had never truly died. The night Britt supposedly perished in a heroic act, saving Jocelyn from the Hook killer, had always felt too perfectly timed, too choreographed. Almost as if it had been written in a script only she and Britt were allowed to read. For months, Jocelyn had lived with the knowledge of Britt's survival, carrying the weight of a secret so dangerously embedded in the roots of her life that it began to twist the foundations of who she thought she was. It wasn't just about lying to her family or deceiving her friends, it was about accepting that she had become part of something far larger and far darker than she had ever imagined. Her alliance with Britt, forged in whispers and hidden transmissions, had become more than a pact, it was a commitment to protect a lie that now had a pulse of its own. The arrangement had started as an act of gratitude. Jocelyn could never forget the way Britt had thrown herself between her and Heather, shielding her with nothing but her body and resolve. But as soon as the body was identified and the funeral was staged, Britt had gone underground, disappearing from Port Charles entirely, yet not from Jocelyn's world. In truth, Britt had reached out to Jocelyn within days of the fake death, revealing a tangled narrative about the WSB, about a rogue cell of operatives that had once belonged to her father, and about an agenda that would threaten every life in Port Charles if left unchecked. Jocelyn hadn't needed much convincing. Whether it was grief, adrenaline, or something deeper, something she didn't yet understand, she agreed to help Britt. Their alliance had grown in complexity. Britt, hiding under multiple aliases, kept contact only through encrypted channels. Jocelyn, meanwhile, became her eyes and ears within Port Charles, embedding herself within the very networks that had once been her home. What had begun as a covert line of communication became a psychological bond. Jocelyn began to think like Britt, anticipate threats, strategize defenses, and bury truths with surgical precision. It was only a matter of time before she was no longer just protecting Britt's secret, she was living it. And the deeper she went, the more detached she became from the person her loved ones remembered. The girl they thought they knew was gone. In her place stood a young woman altered by secrets, sharpened by lies, and hollowed by a paranoia she couldn't escape. And yet, Jocelyn couldn't stop. The stakes had become too high. Through Britt, she had learned about shadow operations tied to the DVX. About corrupt WSB handlers who had manipulated agents like pawns in a global game of psychological warfare. Britt herself had been used. Infected with an experimental pathogen meant to destabilize her neurology under the guise of treating her Huntington's. What Britt injected into her body wasn't salvation, it was surveillance. An internal tracker wrapped in the illusion of hope. She had faked her death not out of fear, but out of necessity. If she didn't disappear, the people who controlled the pathogen would come for her again, and for anyone who tried to help her. Jocelyn had made her choice. She had become part of Britt's resurrection. But the truth weighed heavier every day. Carly had begun to notice the changes. Her daughter's sudden disappearances, erratic moods, and emotional detachment had triggered old alarms. Carly, never one to let a gut feeling slip past, began digging, and the web she uncovered led her to old footage, flight manifests, WSB surveillance records that had been scrubbed too perfectly. And when she finally confronted Jocelyn, it wasn't rage she felt, it was fear. Fear that her daughter was no longer just hiding something, she was becoming someone else entirely. The confrontation between mother and daughter had been seismic. Carly demanded the truth. Jocelyn offered none. The silence between them was more terrifying than any confession could have been. But beneath that silence, Carly saw it in her daughter's eyes, the knowledge, the guilt, the secret begging to explode. And then, with trembling hands, Jocelyn said one name, Britt. That was all Carly needed to hear. Everything she feared had been true. The girl who had died in her arms was alive, operating from the shadows. And her daughter was not only protecting her but aiding her mission. The ramifications of that revelation were immediate and devastating. Anna, Brennan, and Dante, once allies Carly believed she could trust, suddenly closed ranks. Files were sealed. Requests for information were denied. Carly was iced out, and the message was clear. She was no longer part of the circle. She had become a liability, a threat to the controlled chaos they were all complicit in. The betrayal gutted her. These were people she had risked everything for. People she had buried the truth for, people she had believed in. And now, they had turned her own daughter into an asset, a ghost living in plain sight. Carly's world, once built on instinct and survival, now trembled under the weight of institutional deception. Jocelyn wasn't just an agent, she was a symbol of how far the WSB had reached into their lives. And the most terrifying part was that Jocelyn didn't seem to want to come back. She had tasted the truth behind the veil, and it had intoxicated her. Britt's survival was no longer the core of the secret, it was the starting point of something far darker. A hidden war was being fought, and Port Charles was the battlefield. Every conversation was monitored, every ally potentially compromised. Lies were currency, and trust had become a myth. Britt, still in hiding, was growing weaker. The pathogen that had been introduced to her system was mutating, affecting not just her neurology but her memory, her ability to distinguish past from present. In her lucid moments, she sent Jocelyn warnings, about new names, about former allies turned enemies, about an internal war within the WSB that had reached a critical point. She feared that her time was running out. But she was more afraid of what would happen if the WSB got their hands on Jocelyn. Because Jocelyn was no longer just an accomplice. She was a successor. The operations Britt could no longer execute. Jocelyn completed. The surveillance networks Britt once monitored now ran through Jocelyn's servers. The moral clarity Britt had once lost was now tangled in Jocelyn's own descent. And as the two of them drifted closer toward whatever endgame fate had prepared, the only question left was, who would survive it? Port Charles would never be the same. Not when the daughter of Carly had turned her back on family to protect a ghost. Not when the systems they thought protected them were revealed as predators in disguise. Not when the lines between hero and villain had dissolved into nothing but shadows and whispers. Jocelyn had made her choice. And in doing so, she had unleashed a reckoning that would consume them all. The insane pact Jocelyn made has begun to unravel the entire balance of power within Port Charles. Her quiet alignment with Britt, long believed to be dead, has become the cornerstone of a secret operation that is now spiraling far beyond its original intent. What began as an act of defiance, Jocelyn protecting the truth of Britt's survival, has transformed into a deeply embedded conspiracy. This isn't just about loyalty anymore, it's about infiltration, sabotage, and total information control. As Jocelyn and Britt continue to pursue their hidden objectives, they have successfully thrown Anna and Jason's ongoing investigation into absolute disarray. The chase for Dalton, once linear and structured, is now blurred by intentional misdirection, encrypted false trails, and a growing web of alliances that neither Anna nor Jason can fully trace. Jocelyn's reckless courage and Britt's underground tactics have forced a recalibration of every known protocol. Even Vaughn, the one person Jocelyn trusts within the WSB's inner corridors, finds himself caught between duty and obsession. His partnership with Jocelyn in tracking Dalton has turned into a personal crusade. But neither of them can escape the growing realization that they're no longer the hunters, they are becoming the hunted. Every step closer to Dalton reveals new lies, deeper corruption, and a network of psychological warfare built not on weapons but manipulation. The very tools they use to dismantle Dalton's reach, surveillance, hacking, controlled leaks, are being used against them in real time. And still, Jocelyn presses forward. Meanwhile, Anna's intel grows more contradictory. Jason, haunted by the ghost of Britt's alleged death, begins to question every memory, every decision, every assumption. He was certain he saw her, alive. But the moment he shares this with Anna, their trust fractures. Because Anna is starting to believe that Britt's survival is more than just a personal betrayal, it's a strategic move meant to destabilize her authority. She can no longer rely on Jason if he's emotionally compromised. But Jason, too, is no longer the silent weapon he once was. The emotional confusion surrounding Britt has reignited a part of him long buried. He wants answers, even if they come at the cost of the mission. The madness of Jocelyn's alliance now bleeds into every corridor of WSB intelligence. Reports are forged, security footage is looped, and audio records mysteriously vanish. Someone is covering tracks with surgical precision. Britt's influence lingers in these digital ghosts. And Jocelyn? She becomes the cipher, neither completely loyal to the Bureau, nor openly rogue. Yet moving with precision that makes her unreadable to both sides. Dalton, meanwhile, watches from the shadows, aware that his hunters are fragmenting. What he once feared from Anna and Jason is no longer his concern. Jocelyn is the threat now. Young, underestimated, and emotionally driven, she's unpredictable, and that makes her dangerous. But the wild card remains Britt. Rumors of her survival reach Dalton, and with it, the knowledge that something ancient and twisted still binds her to his own past experiments. If she's alive, then so is a piece of the puzzle Dalton thought he buried forever. As Britt's health deteriorates due to the pathogens still in her system, a bioengineered creation originally tied to Dalton's network, her timeline shortens. But her mind remains sharp. And her connection with Jocelyn grows deeper. She knows Jocelyn has become more than an ally. She's become the last chess piece, the one player everyone underestimated. And as long as Jocelyn continues to dance between the lines of truth and illusion, Port Charles remains in a state of controlled chaos. But the control is slipping. Anna's methods grow more aggressive. Jason starts chasing whispers instead of facts. Vaughn becomes paranoid, unsure whether he's being followed by Dalton's men or betrayed by Jocelyn herself. And Jocelyn? She begins to question everything. Was the pact she made with Britt an act of salvation, or the beginning of a total identity collapse? The more she hides, the more her old life disappears. And in its place, a darker version of herself emerges, one who can lie without blinking, manipulate with ease, and destroy evidence without hesitation. This new Jocelyn is what Britt always feared, and always needed. Someone who could finish what she started. But if they go too far, if the lies outweigh the truth, then Port Charles won't be saved. It will be rewritten entirely. And by the time Anna and Jason realize the scale of the misdirection, it may be too late to stop what's coming. Because the future of this mission no longer belongs to them. It belongs to Jocelyn. And she no longer knows if she's the hero, the villain, or something far more dangerous. This is no longer a rescue. This is a revolution. The story surrounding Jocelyn has taken a darker, more complex turn, one that redefines her role within the tangled web of intelligence, deception, and legacy. What began as a simple sense of loyalty to Britt has evolved into a layered operation, one rooted in psychological manipulation, fragmented truths, and the weight of secrets too dangerous to surface. Jocelyn has uncovered what no one else could, the true extent of Britt's survival, the haunting experiments tied to her illness, and the staggering revelation that her disappearance was never accidental. It was orchestrated. What Jocelyn now holds is not just knowledge, it is power. Britt, long assumed dead, has re-emerged not as a victim but as a weapon. The truth Jocelyn has discovered is that Britt was forced into silence under the oppressive control of a rogue division connected to Dalton's network. A clandestine cell within the WSB itself. Britt was not just hidden, she was suppressed, medically and psychologically restrained by an implanted pathogen that mimics advanced Huntington's symptoms. Used as a means to keep her subdued and compliant. Now, with her mental clarity partially restored through experimental treatments, Britt is speaking again, and what she has to say is nothing short of earth-shattering. For Jason, these revelations are a tectonic shift. He had once believed that Britt died a hero's death, protecting Jocelyn from the Hook killer. That moment had defined a part of him, left him fractured, searching. Now, as Britt prepares to come forward, Jason is forced to reconcile the lie he lived with the truth Jocelyn now confirms. Britt's return means not only emotional upheaval but also strategic advantage. The documents, voice recordings, And encrypted data Britt smuggled out of her captivity are damning, proof of experimental programs tied to WSB breakaway operatives, unauthorized missions, and even the manipulation of biological agents for population control. These revelations place Jason and Jocelyn at the center of an unfolding international scandal. And while Jason understands how to compartmentalize emotion and act with ruthless clarity, Jocelyn is still learning how to live in the gray. Her determination to protect Britt at all costs has given her strength, but it has also made her dangerous, willing to lie, sabotage, and manipulate even those closest to her if it means preserving the fragile alliance they've built. Her mother Carly has begun to suspect something is wrong. Anna is already chasing the wrong suspects. And Dante's surveillance team is unknowingly feeding false data, all because of the veil of misinformation Jocelyn continues to craft around Britt's survival. But Britt's return is not merely symbolic, it is strategic. She carries with her evidence that could dismantle the last remnants of Dalton's reach within the intelligence community. She names names. She identifies safe houses. She documents the illegal trials. And more importantly, she exposes the WSB's role in concealing the full scope of the biological threat that nearly took her life. This information, if leaked to the public or even used in political negotiation, could shift the entire balance of power in Port Charles and beyond. Jason sees the opportunity, and the danger. With Britt's intel, they could dismantle the rogue factions, neutralize Dalton's influence, and restore some semblance of justice to those who were experimented on, including Britt herself. But Jason also knows what this means. Britt will never be safe again. Nor will Jocelyn. By confirming the truth, Jocelyn has essentially tethered herself to a future shaped by secrecy, surveillance, and constant threat. For now, though, Jocelyn is resolute. The deal she made with Britt, the vow to protect her, to act as her voice when the world refused to listen, has become her purpose. It gives her clarity in the chaos. And though Carly, Anna, and others begin to question her behavior, Jocelyn doubles down. She codes false reports. She reroutes intel. She positions Britt's return not as a resurrection, but as a tactical illusion, a ghost haunting the systems that tried to silence her. But even as Britt's information is validated, files cross-checked by Jason, data confirmed by underground whistleblowers, Jocelyn begins to feel the psychological toll. Living this lie means cutting ties with her past self. The Jocelyn who once sought normalcy is gone. In her place is someone molded by crisis, shaped by exposure to horrors most people can't imagine. And it begins to affect her judgment. She grows suspicious of everyone, even Vaughn. She starts creating contingency plans in case Britt is captured again, or worse, betrayed. Yet it is Jason who grounds her. His belief in Britt, his unspoken gratitude toward Jocelyn for protecting her, keeps their fragile alliance intact. Jason sees something in Jocelyn he once saw in himself, a willingness to carry the burden of unspeakable truths for the greater good. And because of that, he places his trust in her. Perhaps more than anyone else in his orbit. The future of this mission, the safety of Britt, and the unraveling of Dalton's empire now rest in Jocelyn's hands. But even as the truth emerges, there are those who would rather bury it. Not everyone within the WSB wants Britt alive. Not everyone wants Jason leading this counter-operation. And certainly no one is prepared for the firestorm that will erupt if the full scale of WSB-sanctioned experiments ever becomes public. The return of Britt, confirmed and weaponized, is not a simple victory. It is a declaration of war. And Jocelyn, with her chaotic resolve and fierce sense of justice, is at the center of it. She has become the shield. She has become the sword. And she will not stop until the world hears Britt's voice again, even if it costs her everything. Of all the unexpected alliances ever to emerge from the chaos of Port Charles, none have proven more shocking, strategic, or potentially game-changing than the covert partnership between Britt and Jocelyn. This new dynamic duo, born out of pain, betrayal, and resilience, has become a symbol of the next generation's refusal to play by the rules of the past. While many believed Britt had perished during her final act of heroism saving Jocelyn from the hook, The truth was far more complicated, and infinitely more dangerous. Britt didn't die. She vanished. And Jocelyn knew the truth all along. What began as an impulsive act of concealment, hiding Britt's survival from even the most trusted allies like Carly and Jason, has grown into a calculated mission of retribution, justice, and information warfare. The moment Jocelyn found out that Britt was alive, recovering from the poisoning and being held in a covert WSB facility under the guise of death, something inside her snapped. Jocelyn, once a student, a daughter, a victim, became a strategist, and Britt, once a rogue doctor living in the shadows of her parents' infamy, became her co-conspirator. This partnership is not born from affection, but from necessity and mutual understanding. Both women have been pawns in a system far larger than themselves. The WSB, DVX. And now Dalton's shadow syndicate have left scars too deep to heal and questions too dangerous to answer. But rather than run, Britt and Jocelyn are pushing back, with precision, with vengeance. And with the kind of inside knowledge that only they possess. Jocelyn is no longer chasing clues, she's creating them. And Britt isn't just surviving, she's weaponizing her past. Together, they've constructed an intelligence network just outside WSB's reach, gathering data on the biochemical experiments Dalton orchestrated across Europe, exposing the reanimation trials, and tracing the network of rogue agents embedded within government agencies. They aren't waiting for Jason or Anna or Dante to find them. In fact, they are actively avoiding them. Why? Because Britt and Jocelyn believe the heroes of yesterday can no longer be trusted to protect the truth. The truth is, Jocelyn has been playing both sides. She infiltrated WSB's training program under the false pretense of patriotism but used the access to steal encrypted files, access deep archives, and pinpoint inconsistencies in the stories about Britt's death. She never believed the narrative, and now, she's the only one who understands just how deeply the rot within the system runs. Her alliance with Vaughn is part cover, part necessity. He provides her with tactical muscle and inside intelligence from a separate faction, but it's Britt who gives her the keys to the past. To the very lies that made Port Charles what it is today. The two women have already disrupted Jason's investigations. The lead he thought he was chasing in Paris? A breadcrumb planted by Jocelyn to delay him. The signal Anna tracked to the Mediterranean? A decoy Britt fed into the system to mislead her former superiors. Because in their eyes, Jason and Anna are still entangled in loyalties too compromised to see the full picture. Britt and Jocelyn are not just exposing corruption, they're rewriting the terms of the battlefield. Every secret Britt has carried with her from her time as a WSB agent, every experimental serum they tested on her in the name of Huntington's treatment. Every lie they spun to silence her has now become a weapon. She's compiled it all, footage, documents, patient logs, and with Jocelyn's help, plans to leak it all through an anonymous global network. But there's a catch, they know this will make them targets. Real targets. WSB does not forgive betrayal, and Dalton's network kills without warning. But Britt has nothing left to lose. Her disease still looms, even if the experimental serum she injected into herself slowed its progression. She doesn't know how much time she has. But she plans to use every second to dismantle the very machine that tried to erase her. Jocelyn, still haunted by the night Britt saved her life, is driven by a moral clarity that burns hotter with every secret she uncovers. She can no longer be the girl who reacts, she is the woman who initiates. No longer satisfied with collecting intel and avoiding detection, they're preparing for exposure. A pressurized truth bomb. A digital confession. One that will name names, Dalton, WSB handlers. False identities, illegal cloning programs, and the full extent of the experiments Britt was forced to endure. They're risking everything. And yet, as the clock ticks, their bond only grows stronger. They understand each other in ways no one else could. Both have been abandoned, underestimated, and rewritten by men in power. Now, they're rewriting their own story. This alliance is terrifying because it is built on clarity. It is focused, intentional, and entirely unpredictable. Even Jason is beginning to sense the ghost in the system, movements too organized to be chance, files too accurate to be guesswork. He suspects someone is feeding misinformation into his network. He doesn't yet realize it's Jocelyn. And he certainly doesn't suspect that Britt, the woman he mourned, is orchestrating the entire operation from the shadows. But the time for shadows is coming to an end. As they prepare for the next phase, an encrypted data drop scheduled to expose years of covert biomedical torture and psychic manipulation, Jocelyn and Britt are ready to step into the light. Not to be heroes, but to be the ones who tore down the house built on lies. Together, they are more than survivors. They are architects of reckoning. And as the truth ripples through Port Charles, as allies become enemies and enemies become exposed, one thing is certain: Britt and Jocelyn will no longer be ignored. They are the storm. And it has already begun.